It is Thursday, September 15th, and we have a lot of ground to cover. There's not a particular overall theme today. We're going to talk about what's going on the ground, the shape of the battle, what life is like in deoccupied Ukraine, what Putin is up to right now, what Turkey is up to, surprisingly, that plays in. And then we're going to have some fun with Russian state media, as we always do. If you don't know me, my name is Darren Gertis. I'm just a professor in the United States. I do these daily updates on what's going on in Ukraine, and I do these because the interest in Ukraine has just dropped like a rock since the initial invasion. Here's Google Trend Search Ukraine, and so it was very important in early February, and then about Johnny Depp's trial, it was out of our public understanding or consciousness, and I think that's wrong. We need to be focused on what's going on over there because this really matters. And thank you for being the kind of person who cares about this. Please like, subscribe. That will help other people see it as well. And let's get started. So we're going to start with the ISW, the Institute for the Study of War. They do a phenomenal job of keeping track of what's going on. Ukrainian forces are continuing counteroffensive operations in eastern Ukraine, increasingly pressuring Russian positions and logistics lines in eastern Kharkiv, northern Luhansk, and eastern Donbas oblasts. And if you look at the map, what you'll see is that they do keep chipping away at him, southeast of Izium and near Lyman. And it's an open question right now whether Lyman has been captured. So stay tuned. Tomorrow we may very well be talking about that. The defeat around Kharkiv Oblast prompted the Kremlin to announce a Russia-wide recruiting campaign. Now, they've been at this for a little while. They've been talking about how each district, like their districts are kind of like, or oblasts, they're like our states, need to have a certain number of recruitment quota, but they were trying to make it look like it was a groundswell, like it was a grassroots effort. It really wasn't. It was AstroTurf. Kremlin officials and state media had not yet previously made countrywide recruitment calls, but had instead asked local officials and outlets to generate forces, ostensibly on their own initiative. And that's what I was just talking about. Okay, let's look at the British Ministry of Defense. They come out with a daily update as well. And so here's their intelligence update. Ukrainian forces continue to consolidate their control of newly liberated areas of Kharkiv. Russian forces have largely withdrawn from that region, and there's like natural barriers, like a river that they're and roads and a railroad, and there's natural barriers that the Russians have withdrawn to, and so we can see the shape of the fight that's coming. The way in which Russian forces have withdrawn in the last week has varied. Some units retreated relatively good order and under control, while others fled in apparent panic. And I showed you the burned out tanks yesterday and that sort of thing. High value equipment abandoned by retreating Russian forces. Such abandonment highlights the disorganized retreat. Okay, let's look at this was a map that I saw on Facebook yesterday. I'm in a group that's really awesome. It's called Stand with Ukraine. It's private. They'll let you in after they kind of confirm that you're not a Russian bot. But yeah, it's a great group, and Tatiana has posted this. It just shows like the percentage of Russian control, and I think that that's great to understand, to get a visual of where we are and where we need to go. Okay, here's an article from The Guardian. Here is Kryvyi Rih. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. That's Zelensky's hometown. Residents urged to shelter as Russian missiles strike again. And so what the Russians did was they struck a dam. The dam is on this river here right near the city. So the dam's actually right here. Let's see if we can scroll in a little bit. And they struck this dam, and that right here, and it's going to flood the entire city, and then it's going to spill down into the basin below. And so, yeah, it's kind of a jerk thing to do to a civilian population when you're supposed to be fighting the military. But the Russians hit the Ukrainian city of Kyiv Rih with cruise missiles again on Thursday. They did this the day before as well, after a devastating strike the day before. Homeland of President Zelensky came as Zelensky met with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. And the Russians, they have this thing about whenever there's like a big conference, a NATO conference, a EU summit, or Zelensky's meeting with somebody really important, they'll do something like really provocative, like shoot missiles at a mall and kill civilians or something along those lines. And It's really something to watch. Zelensky, in his late night address on Wednesday, described Russia's attack as the work of weaklings and scoundrels who had fled the battlefield and were doing harm from far away. And I think that's a fair statement. I mean, this wasn't there was no military target here. Russia has stepped up its attacks on power and utilities providers, and what they did with that was create blackouts, widespread blackouts by hitting that, and so that's what's going on there. Okay, the next article. Putin does not believe that Ukraine invasion was a mistake. So, German Chancellor Scholz, that's him on the right hand side. And this was a picture of back in February. They were just talking on the phone, but he met with Putin on as a video call or phone call. And Putin does not think that he made a mistake. He's holding his ground, and he thinks he just needs to keep going forward. The picture here is actually fascinating. This was from February 15th. This was like when the war first began, or was just about to begin. And he's meeting, like, why would you put somebody at the far end of the table like this to show you're more powerful? Like, there's something interesting in the psyche of somebody that's going to do that to somebody else. Vladimir Putin seems to believe that he did not make a mistake by launching an invasion of Ukraine, says German Chancellor Scholz after a 90-minute meeting. Shows no indication that new attitudes are emerging. Schultz urged Putin to seek a diplomatic solution based on a ceasefire and a complete withdrawal. Putin wasn't buying that, and prospects for peace seem to be minimal. But next article, Moscow's local allies were told. Now, this is really, really fascinating to me because we're just talking about the deoccupation. Moscow's local allies, these are people that eventually collaborated with the Russians, were told that Russia is here forever, and now they flee Ukraine. And this puts these people in a real bind. Like, I'm not a big fan of collaborators, but just think about how these people have been, are experiencing the world now. Just weeks ago, Inira was working in the Russian occupation administration. She's a collaborator. But then the Russian troops fled the city, and Ukrainian army retook occupied territories in the north. She and her family fled with what expected would be swift punishment for collaborating, as it generally is for collaborators. Insistence by Moscow installed officials that they were there to stay forever and decided to cooperate or simply try to live quietly under Russian rule. Everyone told us that we are here now, we are here, and you have nothing to be afraid of, said Inira, recalling promises from officials sent by Moscow. Okay, so this is why another reason you just can't believe what the Russians say. So truth is not a high priority here. And I don't mean just like hiding the truth in war, like our battle is going to be here. No, 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 it's going to be here. I mean, they just lie and lie. Like there's something cultural about being okay with lying. 5 days ago, they were telling us that they would never leave. And well, you know what happened. The fact is obvious that Russia is never leaving. Andrei Turak, a leader of the Russian governing United Russia Party, during a visit to Kupasant in July, Russia will never leave here, and all the necessary aid will be provided. That vow, along with the threat of violence, was crucial to project Moscow's power into the towns and villages. Okay, so I got this article because I thought, wow, when I finished reading this, I was like, I got to use that because think about what the retreat has done to everything, like everything that they did here. Think about what it's done to the rest of the region. Where they've been saying we're here forever, we're about to hold a referendum, we're what now the people that have been trying to hold out, when they hear of it, when the news actually gets to them, because they're really trying to not let the news get to them, it's going to change their perspective. Like, well, they've been chased out of there. Well, why not here? Ukraine has vowed to catch locals who collaborated with the Russian army and cooperated, and that's generally a trend wherever you see collaboration with an enemy. So it set off an exodus of people for the border, and the Russians closed the border. So, sorry, too bad. Well, we needed you when we needed you. We don't need you anymore. You're on your own. We'll never go back, said Sergei, Inira's boyfriend, who was carrying a small bag with shoes and sweaters from the aid center. There's nothing for us to go back to. And it's such an unfortunate, like terrible place for these people who felt like they had to collaborate to be, and good on people that said still resisted. And but the fascinating thing is that when word gets out here, it's going to undermine everything that Russia's doing throughout there. Okay, now let me keep going. um, Tears and relief as liberated towns are freed from Russian occupation. That guy looks pretty happy having liberated the town. Let me see some. I mean, just look at the faces of people that are now no longer having to hide in the basement. Look at the shelter around here, like what has happened to the town. Like who was who was being so scary that they had to do this to the town. Let me do just a couple more pictures, like handing out food relief, and this is in Baklia, and then there's one more that I wanted to show, and yeah, here, this I'm about to show this a basement, a torture chamber. I'm going to show that in just a little bit. Okay, reporters' notebooks, civilians in newly liberated areas tell of hardship and abuse under occupation. So, Alexander, a 53-year-old former Ukrainian soldier, said he had been imprisoned and tortured for weeks. They slapped 2 battery clamps on my hands. If you lie, we'll dial it up more. Okay, this is the 21st century. Why? What are we torturing them for? Well, he was a former law enforcement or was law enforcement or something, and so they're trying to get evidence or information about where the army is, like as if he knew necessarily. Ukrainian counteroffensive launched on September 6th described life under the occupation as defined by blackouts, medicine shortages, steady shelling, and debates with Russian occupation forces about supposed Nazis. I love this last line. And debates with Russian occupation forces about supposed, where are the Nazis? Show us where the Nazis are. Well, you show us where the Nazis are. I mean, that's probably what that went like. Most of the region was captured by the Russians in the early weeks of the invasion, which was launched after February 24th. Izium fell in April. And during the occupation, locals had little information. Now, this is the problem. They have little information. They're cut off from the rest of the world. They don't have not only don't they have electricity or internet or cell services, they just don't have information. And so when the Russian officials say we're here to stay, they have no choice but to believe them. I read another article where they're saying there's a new president. Russia has taken over most of Ukraine, and I mean, they're telling them these lies. Okay, this was the torture chamber that I was talking about. Russian torture chamber in liberated Baklya. The Lord's Prayer was carved into the wall by Ukrainian prisoners. This is from the Ministry of Defense, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, and again, it's the 21st century. I mean, it's almost hard to wrap your mind around. Okay, so Ukrainian victory has pushed Russian officials to start talking about general mobilization. And I've come to be convinced that without general mobilization, Russia will lose. And I hope they don't generally mobilize, but Ukraine will win, short of something changing like a general mobilization. And even then, they could with the right weapons. But there will be a long, hard, difficult slog if there's general mobilization. The head of Russia's Communist Party had frank words about extremely difficult and troubling circumstances facing lawmakers in the wake of Ukraine's stunning battlefield success. For as long as I can remember, there has never been such a situation like this. This special military operation in Ukraine has turned into a full-fledged war. Whoa, he can go to jail for using the word war by Russian law. So this is something. The maximum mobilization of forces and resources is now required. So he's calling for that. Merely calling for calling the Ukraine operation a war instead of using the Kremlin's preferred euphemism, special military operation, was a jailable offense. Critics have termed it a war or invasion, have faced prosecution on charges of discrediting the armed forces or spreading false news. And this has happened to a number of people. So, but now high officials are doing that. Without full mobilization, moving to a war footing, including for the economy, we will not achieve proper results, said Mikhail Shermet, a lawmaker from the ruling United Russia Party, member who sits on the Duma's Security Committee. Like, this is no slouch, right? Um, a growing number of Western estimates say Russia may have lost around 25,000 troops. That's the Western estimates. That's the UK and American estimates, roughly about 25,000, putting the estimates of all casualties at about 80,000. Now, the Ukrainian estimate's really interesting. It's 52,000. And yesterday I showed this thing where I was going through an RT article and looking at the comments. And one of the commenters, a Russian, said, well, the Ukrainians are lying. This 52,000, it's not 52,000. It's our own estimates are 48,000. I'm like, okay, don't quibble, killed, and don't quibble about that 4,000. Your own internal estimates, and they're pointing at that. I think that Russian document that was talking from the Ministry of Finance that was talking about 47,000 and change or something like that. And I'm like, okay, well, then you can have that 47,000 killed. You still have that multiple of 2 or 3 times, which means that 150,000 minimum is really about what you're looking at. It's bad. Russia's relied on contract soldiers, largely recruited from remote and impoverished areas, and authorities have struggled to replenish the ranks. And you even saw, and I talked about this yesterday as well, recently appeared video, a shot at a prison where they're contracting for Wagner and saying, if you go to the front lines in 6 months, you're free, and if you try to run away, we'll shoot you. Igor Gherkin, he's a military blogger, said that mobilization was the last chance for victory. He's probably right. I agree with him. If Russia doesn't fully mobilize, they cannot win. If you ask me my opinion, I would declare martial law. I would declare mobilization, said the Chechnyan leader. So you're hearing these choruses all around of calls for mobilization, and those are going to grow. This is Russia's Ukraine losses are Turkey's gains. Now, so what we know about President Erdogan, or I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name right, the president of Turkey has brokered the grain deal with Russia. He has been a calming source in the region, but he has his own interests. And this is why I find this is one of the reasons that I find Ukraine so fascinating. It's the leadership angle. Like I'm a professor who created leadership programs. I created a master's in leadership, a minor. I'm working on a bachelor's in leadership. I teach power and influence and those kind of classes, right? So you just look at the dynamics, the interest, the varied interest that the players have. And what got me going here was Zelensky. Zelensky is actually like such a fascinating figure. He was a terrible politician beforehand with 25% approval rating. He has 90-ish% approval rating right now, and he's done, as a wartime leader, almost everything right. Okay, let's get back to this. So Putin and the president of Turkey, Erdogan, okay, the return to Crimea to Ukraine, of which is an inseparable part, is essentially a requirement of international law. That's what the president of Turkey just said. I mean, that is really, really striking. It's just amazing that he said that, but and Putin is not going to want to hear that. But the president of Turkey, he kind of wants to take over as part of the area, as you know, have more presence in the area, and have Russia have less presence in the Black Sea. It's a pointer to the opportunities that Turkey is eyeing to push the envelope in its ties with Russia at a time when the Kremlin is bogged down in Ukraine. Like you, Russia's not going to be able to withstand extra pressure from the outside. So while he is not really Ukraine's friend, being a kind of an enemy to Russia is still a good thing for Ukraine. So just triangulating on this is absolutely fascinating. Okay, Ankara, that's the capital of Turkey, is getting ready to fill the gaps as Moscow's influence appears poised to decline. Turkey has played a role in the intermediary, just demonstrated in the deal it brokered in July. Yet Erdogan has remained consistent in backing Kyiv, including in Crimea, the historic home of Crimean Tatars. Okay, so if you go back and do some research, the Tatars lived in Crimea, and when during Stalin's time, I think it was Stalin's time, might have been Khrushchev or something, but I think it was during Stalin's time. They essentially took this people group that has always or lived there for hundreds of years and moved them to like Siberia or something, and it's just like evacuated them from Crimea and then repopulated it with Russians. And that's what they're trying to do with Ukraine as well, doing the same kind of thing. A community that sees Turkey as its kin state. So these were like almost Turkish in nature, the Tatars. Turkey has felt threatened by Russia's expansion into the Black Sea since the invasion of Georgia in 2008. Syria was the focus of a three-way summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin backs Syria. Putin is tight with Iran. Turkey wants to go to war with the Kurds in northern Syria. So they have various interests. Um, Somebody pointed out the other day, yeah, I love all the toilet paper roll ads. I have no control over that. I don't know why toilet paper roll ads are prominent on these media, but I'm certainly not Googling that. Just, okay, back to the show. Turkey is methodically turfing out Russia from its neighborhood and regions where Moscow has held strategic edge over its geopolitical rivals in recent years. Moscow still has friends in the Iranians and Syrians, and so that's what's going on there. It's fascinating geopolitical triangulation, and it's just really interesting. Now, Putin was also in meeting with the president of China, and this was in the South China Morning Post, and they talked about some of this. China offers Russia strong support on core interests as President Xi and Vladimir Putin meet for the first time since the Ukraine invasion. Putin said that he understood China's questions and concerns about its war in Ukraine. And here we go. China is ready to work with Russia in extending strong support to each other on issues concerning their respective core interests. Now, that's really fascinating. You want to talk about just a fascinating triangulation. Look at these two and what they're getting or not getting. Now, this is in RT. This is the Russia Today. So you're getting a uh, Russian state media version of this. But even in the Russian state media version of this, it's incredibly muted. China's not coming out and going, "You go, Russia. We got your back the whole way." They're very canny about this. Chinese leader said he's willing to work alongside Moscow and to increase stability in the world. President Xi wants to work with Moscow to take on the responsibilities of the great powers. But that's he didn't. He's not really saying a whole lot here. China is willing to make efforts with Russia to assume the role of the great powers. Okay, to assume to become. So they always talk about this bipolar, this unipolar world with America and the West at the top, and how they want this bipolar world with Russia and China and these other countries kind of off counterbalancing the United States and the West. So China is willing to make efforts with Russia to assume the role of great powers and to play a guiding role to inject stability and positive energy into a world rocked by social turmoil. Who's causing the social turmoil? But this is what President Xi told Russian President Vladimir Putin during the Leaders' Summit, that we're willing to assume the role of great powers. Actually, we're going to be the bigger brother as we move forward because you're kind of pantsing yourself on the world stage and being seen as a paper tiger. But he didn't say quite that. Putin likewise praised the multifaceted ties the two countries have forged with trade with Beijing. Last year, he noted a volume that had increased 25% in the first half of 2022. That's because he couldn't sell stuff in the West, so he had to look south. That's what happened there. Russian leader affirmed Moscow's support for Beijing's One China policy and condemned the attempts and provocations by the United States in and around Taiwan. Overall, I have to say that attempts at creating a unipolar world have been quite ugly and unacceptable as of late for the majority of nations on this planet. So they keep talking about this unipolar versus bipolar thing, and they're talking about how, see, the nations that haven't lined up behind the United States in the West. That's what he's talking about. Putin thanked China for its cooperation on the foreign policy stage. We highly value the balanced approaches of our Chinese friends when it comes to the Ukrainian crisis. That's it. Like, he didn't get any guarantees of military support. Maybe behind closed doors they talk, but that was it. And then if you look at RT and other articles, Putin predicts record trade with China. That was just a quick summary of the same kind of thing that we just talked about, or another RT article. But nothing else came of this. Like, Xi played his cards really close to his chest. So, okay, last little bit from RT. Vitaly Sullivan, the U.S. propaganda machine, is playing dirtier than ever. And again, this is more fun with Russian state media. Publication of a recent New York Times article allegedly declassified materials from U.S. intelligence agencies about Russia's purchase of millions of artillery shells and missiles from North Korea. John Kirby, U.S. National Security Council's coordinator for strategic communities, walked it back. He conceded that there were no indications that the arms purchases had actually occurred yet. Yet is the operative term, or that North Korean munitions had made it onto the battlefield. That does not mean that they were not trying to purchase this from North Korea or that they had any agreements. They did. So Russia tells like half the story in these things in Russia Today. And then they look, and then they call And I've seen this. I've said this again and again. And they call their enemies what they're doing. And then they talk about the US propaganda machine. Wait a minute. This is a propaganda machine. It's playing dirtier than ever. Why? Because this isn't true. It's not on the battlefield, but they are working to do this. And so, yeah, that's how RT works. Okay, that's all that I have for today. Thank you for your time. If you're still here, please consider subscribing because I will be back and I will do this tomorrow. Do me one more favor, hit like if you like it because that will spread this in the Facebook algorithm and others will be able to hear it. Thanks again. See you tomorrow.